Evening, James.
Good evening. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for joining me this evening on the Looking Back slash. Tell us the name of your podcast, James.
Stumbling through history.
Awesome. It's our combo show where I like looking back at the past and James likes telling stories of the past. So, James, what are we going to talk about tonight?
Okay, we're talking about the Civil War this evening. I am going to specifically talk about the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, but we're going to talk a lot about the Civil War all around and everything. I guess this particular episode will be called The Last Defense of Little Round Top.
Ooh, Little Round Top.
Yeah, Little Round Top. Most people think that Little Round Top is all about Joshua Chamberlain and the 20th Maine, which it is, of course, but it's also about the local boys that fought at the very last battle.
Local boys.
Yeah, the local Pennsylvania Reservists who ended up showing at at the battle on the second day at the end.
They weren't supposed to be there?
Well, yes, they were, but
Okay.
they showed up at the very end to make the final defense of their home ground. Okay, so before we get started, we should do a general background of the Civil War,
Yes, please.
especially at what's going on here at this point. Okay, so it's 1863. It's the summertime. The South is at its high mark right now. They're doing really well in the East. The West is questionable, but most of the people are paying attention to the East. First of all, we'll talk about the West. What's going on in the West is that the Union is trying to cut the Confederacy in half by basically taking over the Mississippi River and gaining control of the Mississippi River. And by the summer of 1863, they have done just that. They have taken New Orleans and they've taken all the northern forts. So what's going on now is there's one last bastion of Confederate defense, and that is the town of Vicksburg. Vicksburg pretty much is a very defensible town. It's in a perfect place on the river where the forts around it can pretty much control anything that tries to pass. General Grant, who has been taking on the Confederacy in the West, he's been tightening a noose around Vicksburg. He had managed to defy logistics and his supply lines. He was totally cut off from his supply lines, and he sailed past the forts on the Mississippi River and went through the marshlands and managed to surround Vicksburg. And so the city of Vicksburg is under siege. Grant is bombarding Vicksburg, and the city residents of Vicksburg have to hide in caves.
In what?
In caves in the side of the hill so
In
they don't get killed by the artillery shell.
my. Okay, like caves on the side of the river?
Like in the side of the hill. They just dug caves
Oh,
inside the side of the hill and they
my.
moved all their furniture inside and they were actually doing quite well that way. And
And
they
they,
were running out of food, which was a big deal. So that was like the most important deal that
oh,
they were having problems with, but not really hiding in the caves. They were actually protected from the artillery.
that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. But anyway, so Grant's tightening the noose. So he's getting ready to cut the Confederacy in half. But in the East, General Lee, who's in command of the Army of Northern Virginia, has taken charge. And basically, he's kind of won a lot of battles. He's actually he's gone against a succession of Union generals. Okay, he's the first general he went up against is George McClellan. And George McClellan ends up running against Abraham Lincoln a year later in the next presidential race. Of course, Lincoln beats him. And it's kind of interesting because Lincoln beats him with the soldier vote. And everybody kind of loved George McClellan. But the true soldier backed up Lincoln.
The soldier vote, you said.
Yes, all the soldiers voted for Lincoln. They did not vote for McClellan.
Huh, interesting.
McClellan McClellan went on a platform of no more war. He wanted to give the Confederacy their independence
Well,
and just end the war. But the soldiers who had lost so much after 4 years of war said that it had to be for something. So they backed Lincoln.
How many people have already died in the Civil War at this point?
By the Battle of Gettysburg, you're looking at least about 125,000.
Okay,
Yeah,
so they're not going to give up. They're not going to give the Confederacy what they want.
exactly. So, anyways, that was McClellan's little background. He tried to run against Lincoln later on in the
Mm-hmm.
war,
Mm-hmm.
and then after Lincoln had taken McClellan out, he replaced him with Ambrose Burnside. Now, Ambrose Burnside is another interesting character. You know, the term sideburns is named after him.
Really?
Yes, he had some crazy sideburns that came out the side of his face. And yeah, that's how the term sideburns stuck.
Because his last name was Burnside.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Well, anyways, Lee took care of him, and he was replaced by a general called Joseph Hooker. Now, Joseph Hooker, something interesting about him is the Army of the Potomac had a lot of camp followers, which consist of families and prostitutes and whatnot. And the term hooker comes from him.
Really?
Yes.
A whole
So
camp of
yes,
families and prostitutes follow you around when you're.
yeah, those are the camp followers, and armies have had camp followers since medieval times. Yeah. Oh
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the camp follower thing kind of came to an end during the modern wars of the last century of World War I and World War II.
You could just make money selling pickles along the way or
Right.
fixing
You
shoes.
could, you could fix shoes, or you could take pictures, or you could sell treats. You know,
Interesting.
whatever the troops needed.
I didn't know that. I don't get to spend enough
Right.
time with you, James. Continue. Know those
Okay. So
things.
finally, the general that was in charge during the Battle of Gettysburg, that we're talking Union generals, it was General George Meade. He had never commanded an army before, but he was like Lincoln's last choice at this point.
And everybody's scared to
Grant's
death of Lee.
right. Grant is still out at Vicksburg, and Grant will end up facing Lee, but that's a story for a different time. Okay, so he's facing Meade. Okay, Meade's got the army at this point. So we have Vicksburg, which is under siege, and Lee is really kicking ass and winning battles. He is outnumbered. The Army of Northern Virginia was outnumbered by the Union Army, the Army of the Potomac, by about 25,000 men. Jefferson Davis asked Lee to send troops to Vicksburg to relieve the siege. Lee decides to not do that, but instead attack the north. Maybe even if he can get as far north as Philadelphia and force the Union to go to the table and sign a treaty.
That was the plan. That wasn't the overall plan, but that's what he wanted.
Right. So Jefferson Davis agrees. So he takes the army in Northern Virginia. Let's see. He takes the army in Northern Virginia up into Maryland, and he was hoping that the people of Maryland would support the Confederacy because they were a southern border-ish, southern-ish kind of state, and he was hoping that maybe they would support him, but they didn't. They didn't support him. He didn't have any help, so his lines of supply got really long and brutal. So he had to kind of live off the land and take what he needed.
Because they're far from home now. This is not like a short distance.
No, a few
America's.
states.
Yeah.
They're out of Virginia and into Maryland and crossing into Pennsylvania. Nowadays, that doesn't seem like much. You could drive there in about a couple hours, but when you're walking on foot with no shoes, which some of them did not have shoes, it takes a little bit longer and it's a bit more brutal. So, yeah, so we're looking at, it's the Union side in the Battle of Gettysburg probably had about 104,000 troops, and the Confederates probably had about 74,000.
Is that considered a lot? 25,000 more troops than the other side's got to be.
It could be. It just depends on tactics. Lee had so far had Lee in the Battle of Chancellorsville had actually divided his army, which was smaller than the Union army, and beat the Union. by cutting his army into half and surrounding and coming in behind him. That's
Just,
why everybody was scared of Lee, because he could take
yeah.
a little army and beat you.
Strategy, tactics, sneaky.
Right. Well, anyway, so Lee's coming up into Pennsylvania, and he doesn't know where he's at because his cavalry commander, Jeb Stuart, is on some kind of crazy raid behind enemy lines, burning towns, taking wagons, getting in the Union papers. And so he's completely blind. He has no idea where the Union Army is, what's going on. He's hoping that the Union Army is following him. He wants to force a confrontation, which
Okay.
actually the Union Army is doing. Meade
Okay.
has decided to follow the Army of Northern Virginia and see what they do, but always staying in between Lee's army and the capital, Washington.
Interesting. Okay.
So here we have Lee's coming up into southern Pennsylvania. So his skirmisher troops get word that there might be shoes in a small college town of Gettysburg.
They went there for shoes?
Yeah, I mean, at least half of the troops there had no shoes. And that had been the way it was even when they were fighting in Virginia as well. The Confederacy always had trouble supplying
Because
and keeping their troops fed and enough ammunition and clothes and everything.
out of their own territory.
Right, the Union always had an advantage like that on the Confederacy. Basically, a lot of historians say that basically the Union fought the Confederacy with one arm tied behind their back. And at any time, they could have taken out that other arm. And yeah, the
And
Confederacy never had any hope because of and their ability to make manufacture and the population. They could send more troops and more troops and more troops.
just literally the difference between the North and the South. One was about industry and
And
manufacturing.
the other was agriculture. It was an Aquarian society. It was old school. It was like the old English type of society.
All of their resources into farming or growing
Cotton was
cotton.
king.
Cotton was
Cotton
king.
was king, especially with the invention of it, which was right before.
Other crops in the South? Tobacco, cotton.
They actually, South Carolina grew rice. Yeah, they had tobacco. But cotton was king. Most profitable farms in the South were about cotton.
And if you're now cut off from the North, you can't get at least half the things you need.
Sure, and of course the North had a naval blockade, so the South couldn't trade with their partners like England and France and the places that really bought their cotton and gave them the things that they needed. Basically, England and France were sympathetic to the South during the whole war, but they never recognized the Confederacy as a legitimate country because they just bided their tongue and waited to see what would happen.
Was it clear to everyone that the Confederates?
Actually, no. There was at this point, like that we're about to talk about,
Oh,
the Confederacy is in its high mark. Lee is
I
kicking
see.
ass.
You said that in the beginning. Everybody's afraid of Lee at this point.
Right, and he could force the people of Washington to freak out and sue for peace, and then the Confederacy gets its independence, and that's what we want, or that's what they want.
Okay, yeah. It depends on which side of the story you're telling.
Right. So basically, Grant and Lee are badass dudes, and Lee's facing Meade at this point, and we're coming up on to Gettysburg. The Confederates were going to this little sleepy town of Gettysburg, and they wanted to get some shoes. And Lee was like, "Well, we don't know where the Union is, so let's go ahead and go this way." So what happened is the skirmishers, these small Confederate Unions, ended up running into a brigade of Union cavalry who were there scouting. They were looking for the Confederates. The same, they were looking for each other. Except the Union had their cavalry and the Confederates didn't. So they run into this Union cavalry, which was commanded by a General Buford, and he decided to go ahead and dismount his cavalry and hold off the Confederates as best he could because of the high ground surrounding Gettysburg was so good. And he knew that if the Union Army could reach Gettysburg in time, that it would be a great place to have a battle.
Okay. It's just knew that area because it's just perfect rolling hills and high ground and low ground.
Right. Like any assault on some of the high ground would be like almost vertically uphill, with the total advantage going to the defending army.
Sure. Huh. Okay.
And so he was like, if we can just hold on to this ground, we can win this battle.
That was the plan.
Right. And it's interesting because Buford was dead, like, I don't know, about a month later in a different battle. But a lot of historians give him credit, that initial credit for holding. So basically, his dismounted cavalry held the Confederates while falling back, and they went ahead and fell back through the town of Gettysburg, and gave it up to the Confederates. And this is on July 1st. This is the first day of the battle.
So the first day, the Confederates are still doing good.
Oh yeah, they brought superior forces against that cavalry brigade and just pretty much sent Bruford running. But he fell back through the town and took the high ground, which he held until two Union corps, about 10,000 troops, showed up to back him up.
Then did he leave?
And Lee was there with about 10,000 troops as well.
Gosh, how many?
But by the time that the town of Gettysburg was taken and the Union reinforcements had shown up and the Confederate reinforcements had shown up, it was nighttime.
How many forces are on this battlefield?
Okay, you have about 104 for the Union and about 74
Oh,
for
that's
the
right. Okay.
Confederacy. And
Taking notes.
so yeah, you have this huge. This is the most troops that showed up against each other in the entire war.
Okay.
And the first day is over. That's July 1st. It's over and done. In the evening, this is interesting. In the evening of July 1st, Lee has made his camp, and Jeb Stuart comes back, his cavalry commander. And Lee, typical of Lee had anger issues.
Okay.
And he basically told him that he was disturbed and not pleased with Jeb Stuart. Jeb Stuart took it quite personally, and Lee had to apologize that evening later on.
Really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting part of this story. Lee was super hot tempered.
Yes. And but he was very well at controlling it. He was your old school gentleman. He is actually related to, or his wife was related to, George Washington. I mean, she was like a great granddaughter of George Washington.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's a Southern gentleman who just happens to be leading an army.
Right, and he had tons of experience. It's interesting. Lee and Grant served together in the Mexican War in the 1840s. A lot of the troops were stationed in California. A lot of the old school troops that fought in the Mexican War.
Okay.
And when the Civil War broke out, they all were taking their sides, and they were out in California, and they had a party, and they said, well, I hope we don't meet against each other. And they went their ways.
Wow. And then they
Yeah,
met
a
each
lot
up,
of it.
met
In
each
fact,
other.
there's a couple under generals who meet up at the end of Pickett's charge. One of them dies, the general for the Confederates, and I don't have his name right now. But yeah, they're both buddies, and they meet up after the end of the third day.
At
Anyways,
Gettysburg. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, keep going.
okay, so we're going to talk today about the second day, and I will talk more about the third day after we're done.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so basically, at the end of the first day, it's nighttime. Both armies are there, and they're making camp. The Union does command the high ground. So at this point, the armies have turned into a fishhook. The Union right flank is bent around a hill called Culp's Hill, and the Confederacies are blocking them. And the lines go all the way down to some other hills, one called Big Round Top, and then one at the end called Little Round Top.
One of them's already famous in history, right?
Yes, Big Round Top, not much. There was some fighting, but Little Round Top at the very end of the Union left flank is what everybody talks about. Okay, so now we're having on the second day, and we have Lee, who has decided to attack the left and right flanks of the Union. Okay, so on the second day, the Confederates attacked Culp's Hill and Cemetery Ridge, which were on the right flanks, and they also attacked the big tops, the big top and the little top, and that was the left side of the Union line. Okay, so for most of the day, on the second day, on Little Round Top, which is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
There was stiff Union resistance against horrendous Confederate assaults upon it. Everybody knows about the actions of Colonel Joshua Chamberlain and his 20th Maine. He's the big hero of Gettysburg, and they fended off an insane attack by the Confederates, and they were on the very end of the Union line, so they were it. That was it. They had to do what and they actually ran out of ammunition, and he did a swinging door, like a door opening attack with bayonets on the Confederates in a desperate thing, which worked. The Confederates freaked out and either ran or got captured.
Wow. That they didn't
Yeah.
like that, did they?
Oh no,
So
that's why they were still attacking at the end of the night after
Oh.
Chamberlain and his 20th Maine had actually been relieved.
Yeah, no kidding. That sounds horrible. I know soldiers don't like to use bayonets.
Yeah. And that's why they surrendered. That's why they were able to freak the Confederates out and make them surrender, because
Okay.
they were coming at them downhill with bayonets.
Oh God, that's Chamberlain.
Yes,
That's what
that's
he did that
Chamberlain.
day.
And he had already been the whole 20th Maine had already been relieved back behind the lines, and they were chilling by the time the battle we're going to talk about happened.
Okay, they were done. They'd already done their thing.
Yes.
How many people
Well,
were in Chamberlain's? Sorry to get off track again. Chamberlain's army, or
he had two brigades
okay, 2 brigades,
against 4 Confederate brigades.
but bayonets downhill.
Yes.
Okay,
When they ran out of ammunition, and that's crazy.
it's just sad. You just
Because
know people are just getting mutilated,
right, right.
stabbed through the eyeballs and in the throat and the chest, and it's like, those are your brothers, man.
Horrible wounds, horrible wounds.
Yeah.
America had to. I don't know. I think it made us who we are. Something about the Civil War, it did. I don't know. I think it turned us into a country, galvanized it.
It could be. Well, I think everybody knows how horrible it was, just in terms of the ugliness of the death and the bodies and the gangrene. And I don't know if today's younger generation are being taught, but I know I was taught like that we do not want to go there again.
No, war is dumb, 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 dumb.
Well, Civil War in particular did not go well in America.
Yes, because those wounds were usually they would lose limbs or die. If you got shot in the stomach, you were dead.
Oh yeah, and so many young men
And if
died.
you got shot in an arm or a leg, you lost those limbs. You were done.
Yeah. What did you say? It was the end of the Romantic Wars? Is that?
Right. It was the beginning of total wars,
Yeah.
war against civil populations. Because that's, you got Sherman's March to the Sea, and basically he waged war on the countryside of Georgia.
Which is how Georgia ended up completely destroyed. They
Right.
literally intended
Especially
to march through and destroy it.
right. Any farms, they foraged because he couldn't have supply lines from the north, so they had to forage and supply themselves. So they would rape and pillage any farm they found, and anything they couldn't take, they would burn.
They left a trail of destruction across the South.
Right. Now, in the Civil War, the Union troops behaved kind of good. You didn't see murders and rapes and things like that.
No, you
You
just saw like the burning
mostly
of.
saw the destruction of property
Yeah.
and the taking of property, and I mean, which is bad enough. I mean, your farm's destroyed and your house is burnt down.
Well, it's just extra bad because the South didn't have really much infrastructure to begin with, and then
Correct.
having all of that stuff just leveled has lasting consequences to this day. Obviously. Yeah, that's such a sad war. Anyway, so let's get on to the good battle.
Well, let's get on to what we were going to talk about.
Okay, that's better. Chamberlain with
Let's
his bayonets. Pretty intense vision in my head.
Right. Okay, so that's all happened already. The battle's been going on all afternoon long, from late afternoon till it's like getting to be early evening. Okay, and this is the final phase for the Battle of Little Round Top. It takes place on the northwestern slope of the hill, and it's across the valley that would later be known as the Valley of Death. I guess most people don't talk about it because the troops that were involved were reservists. They weren't veterans. They weren't part of the normal Army of the Potomac. They were basically garrison troops that were coming into for reinforcements.
Because they were from
And so,
Pennsylvania, so they were sent out to reinforce whoever
well,
was nearby.
right. Well, it just happened to be that they had been given garrison duty of Washington, which is interesting. Did you know that Washington at this point in 1863 was the most defended city in the entire planet?
What's garrison mean?
Garrison duty basically means you guard walls. You,
So you're
if
sent
the
in
enemy comes
as
through
like
your
sentries.
walls, yeah, you're just basically guarding something, a castle or a town or a river or something.
In the state national guard.
Yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah, because they were volunteers. They were the militia.
Yeah, okay. And they're coming from where? They're
They're coming from Washington,
okay, to Gettysburg.
right?
All right.
But we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Let's see. Yeah, so they're getting. So this is the final battle. And at this point, the troops that are fighting in front of the hill are Union regulars against what's left of the Confederate assault that happened earlier in the day. The only thing on the hill at this point, all of the infantry has been pulled off. Chamberlains units and other units of the main regiments have been pulled off the hill. And the only thing on the hill right now are gun batteries, cannon batteries, these units of cannons that are up there. And it's interesting because those guys had to wrestle those cannons up that hill by hand.
Wow.
So they've been working on that all day long. And they got their cannons up on the hill. And so after 3 hours of hand-to-hand fighting all over the hill, the Little Round Top was still in dispute. And there was still some sporadic fighting. There was battle smoke all around the place. It could choke a man in some spots. And the aroma of death was everywhere, sweet and foul. Death was not yet over with this hill. Okay, the Confederates thought they still had some more work to do. Longstreet's forces earlier in the day had successfully taken the Devil's Den and the ridges and woods around it, the Peach Orchard, and a long section of the Emmitsburg Road. Their attack had slowed and lost a lot of its punch as night settled. But the hill was still threatened to be overrun. There were some Union defenses at the wheat field and at Cemetery Ridge. Those are more on the right flanks. Okay, but the Confederates were still thinking that they could take that hill. There were still some ragged remains of brigades that were commanded by a General Kershaw, a General Sims, a General Wolford, and a General McLaws. And they were still heading up the hill. And these are the same troops that had defeated Major General E. Sickles. He's a Union general that was more of a politician than a general.
Mm-hmm.
And he had done something really silly during the day and sent his troops way out in front where they could be surrounded by Confederates.
Oh, no.
Well, anyways, these guys had beat the crap out of him early on.
Okay.
And so they're still fighting. They're still trying to get to the Round Top. But it looked pretty ominous from their viewpoint. There's a Georgian captain that is quoted as saying it was the strongest natural position he ever saw.
The Little Round Top.
Right.
Everybody wants to get to the top of that hill.
Right. It's the left flank, and if they can take it, the Union lines will be compromised and they have to pull out.
Because they just have the best view over this valley of death.
They would have an undefensible position at that point if the Confederates take the hill.
Okay.
So the hill at this point is only protected by gun batteries. There was an Ohio battery and a New York battery and a battery from Massachusetts. They were hanging out up there. They're just gun batteries. Infantry can, if there's enough infantry, they can easily take cannons. So they're tripping out. But right at this point, arriving on the battle scene is a Brigadier General Samuel Duvall Crawford's Pennsylvania Reservists. They've come to man the Round Top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these guys actually had been detached earlier the month before on June 25th. And they've been detached to go be reinforcements for the Army of the Potomac. So they've been kind of following the Army of the Potomac around. These,
They're kid volunteers.
right. I mean, they've been trained, but they just haven't seen any fight. So they're like itching to prove
Oh,
themselves.
really?
These local Pennsylvania boys. And they
Okay.
were led by a Major General Crawford, who himself was a Pennsylvania.
I know some Pennsylvania boys. I wouldn't want to fight them.
Right. He had been in the command of the Pennsylvania Reserves since May. He was a rather odd duck, said Commander Crawford. He was a graduate of medical school at the University of Pennsylvania. He served in the old Army as an assistant surgeon, okay? He was stationed at Fort Sumner in Charleston Harbor in April of 1861 when the fortress was attacked by the Confederates, basically the very start of the war. He decided at that point he didn't want to be a doctor anymore. He wanted to be an infantryman and fight. Okay, so he quit being a doctor and he got his first assignment as a major. In 1862, he got his general star and commanded a brigade at Cedar Mountain, Virginia. He was wounded at Antietam, and when he recovered, he was given command of the Pennsylvania Reserves at Washington. So that's when he became their commander.
So he's got a
He
little bit
was
of experience, but not a lot.
right. He had been in battle. Their commander had been in battle before.
Mm-hmm.
His bulging, pale blue eyes were not so much piercing as they were earnest.
As they were what?
And his mutton chops that framed his face gave him a comedic, clownish appearance. Nobody could take him seriously with those sideburns, but he was ready to prove himself and his troops on the battlefield. The troops had been marching for 2 days, and they were pretty tired, and they needed food and sleep, but they gave it up to go ahead and man Little Round Top. Crawford deployed his regiments in between the cannon brigades that were already up on the hill. He brought in his 7th Pennsylvania, his 13th Pennsylvania, and his 2nd Pennsylvania.
Is that a lot? How many troops was that?
He probably had about 2,500. And the Confederates probably had maybe 1,500, a lot less.
It's dwindling.
Right. They had been fighting all day. These are fresh Union troops fighting Confederate troops that had been fighting for 3 hours, fighting uphill.
If it wasn't hard enough.
Right. But they were brave guys, and they were eager to take that hill. They thought they could. So the Pennsylvanians come up in there, and they can see that the enemy is moving forward at impetuous speed, waving their swords and their bayonets, somehow still visible in the dusk. There's a favorite story that is told about this particular part of the battle, about this group of, this Company K of the 1st Pennsylvania. And they were actually from the area around Gettysburg. They were Adams County boys. Yeah, it was the county that they...
That was home for them.
Yes, exactly. And
Interesting.
so they show up, and right away there's an artillery officer. He's of German descent, and he comes up and he asks them, these guys of Company K, he comes up to them and he says, "Dunderum Blixen," cried the officer. "Don't let them dim rebels took my batteries." And the colonel of the Company K of the 11th Reserves, he says, "You double load your guns, and we will see to your safety." And all along the line of infantry, they hollered at him, "Stand by your guns, Dutchy, and we will stand by you." So no sooner had Crawford gotten his guys into line than the Confederate skirmishers came into sight. In between Crawford and the oncoming Confederates were retreating Union soldiers. These were veterans who had fought earlier in the day.
Oh, they're retreat. Okay.
And they're retreating up the hill trying to get away from these crazy Confederates. They probably outnumbered the Confederates, but they were retreating.
This is an important battle. And it's
Right. And these guys,
toe to toe.
these Union regulars who had been fighting all day for the wheat field, they probably lost about 50% of their troops. And they were trying to figure out where the rear was and if they could get there.
Really?
Yeah. There was a group of Crawford's Pennsylvanians who called themselves the Bucktails. And they saw that the the Union veterans were coming up the hill and they were stumbling. Pennsylvanians had lied down on the ground. They had given orders to lie down on the ground to avoid getting shot.
Okay.
Now, these guys were tripping over them, trying to get back to their lines, running on all fours, trying to avoid bullets. He says that the whole plane in front of him, Crawford, he said that the whole plane in front of him was covered with fugitives from all kinds of divisions that were rushing to the back, trying to get to the rear
Just
in
trying to
disorder.
escape.
Right. And one of his reservists said, well, I think they look like they're running like sheep. And these are the veterans that looked at the reservists with disdain.
And now it's
Yes, they're running, and the Pennsylvanians are ready to take on the Confederates.
just,
Okay,
yeah.
one of Crawford's officers asked him, "Can we fire yet?" And he said, "Oh no, we can't fire yet. There's troops in between us. We don't want to hit our own guys." At this point, the Confederates thought they had the battle. There's a Georgia major that is quoted as saying that the Union troops were been vigorously pressed and victory was in order.
Gosh. Okay. This is
But
like,
to be quite honest, the Confederates were out of steam. They were done.
yeah.
They've been fighting for 3 hours. They
Yeah.
had no more steam at all.
Yeah, I can see why this is interesting to you, though, because this is Gettysburg coming right down to the last little hill.
Right. Well, at least on the second day,
Yes. Yes.
which is, and to me, I think the second day is really what decided the battle. But we'll talk about the third day later. So the Confederates were going to make a final charge, and you could hear the rebel yell, the good old rebel yell that everybody talks about. A Confederate soldier once said that you can't do the rebel bell yell unless you're at full sprint and you have and you're being shot at. It's the only way to do it right, properly. Okay, so at this point we have the Pennsylvania guys. They're on the ground. The veterans of the Army of the Potomac are retreating, and we have the Confederates coming up behind them. And Crawford, the general in command of the Union forces, wouldn't let his troops fire. But he wasn't in command of the cannons. So the cannons went ahead and opened up on the Confederates. While the veterans were still trying to get to the back. When the cannons fired, it went through the Confederates just like a scythe. It just ruined them. But the Confederates did get close enough that one of the Union commanders had to shoot a Confederate infantryman in the face at point blank range.
That's pretty close.
So they almost took the cannons.
Almost. That's pretty close.
Everything in the Battle of Gettysburg was almost everything.
Really?
They almost took Pope's Hill on the other side during the day. Yeah, it's crazy how close it got.
It's just the theme of the 3-day battle is almost.
Right. I mean, man for man, I'd probably have to admit that the Confederates were better soldiers.
Really?
And they were better commanded. Just because I don't know why. I don't know why. I mean, it just seems to me that they won a lot of battles. Just like in the Vietnam War, you can win all the battles and still lose the war.
But not like all Confederate soldiers. You're talking about the ones at Gettysburg?
I'm talking, yeah, pound for pound. I think all the Confederate soldiers were better
Really?
soldiers. It's just the Union had more and more and more and more and more.
The South had farm boys.
Towards the end of the war, the Union was well led and well trained. So I bet you by the end of the war they were equals.
Okay. Yeah, the Confederates planned. They knew they were going into it, and their hearts and souls and passions, their belief was behind
Basically, they were defending their country, which the Union never really was. They were fighting for an ideal.
Totally different if you're a soldier on the battlefield.
Right, and the Confederates tend to be better shots. They were more woodsmen. They were more country boys. They go out and rustle them up some coon or whatever they need to eat.
Noodling, fishing.
Exactly. So yeah. Well, anyways, so we've got this going on. The cannons have just opened up on the Confederates, and they messed them up pretty good. So finally, Crawford gives the guys the command to go ahead and fire. So they stand up. They shoulder their arms and they let off 2 volleys into the Confederates, which is considered to be a a fatal blow. At this point, since the Confederates had just been fired on by cannons and 2 volleys from the Pennsylvanians, Crawford rode his spirited horse right up to his color guard of the First Reserves. He leaned over and he grabbed the flagstaff of the color bearer, a Corporal Swoop, who refused to let the general have his colors. "I can't give you my colors," he said. Crawford, with some annoyance, replied, "Don't you know me? I am your general. Give me your colors." The corporal gave up the colors, but insisted on grabbing the general's pants leg and holding on, hoping, one supposes, that he could stay close to his cherished flag.
I've heard this story. It's magnificent.
So at this point, he rides up to the front of his troops and he commands in a loud voice, "Forward, reserves!" And with a shriek that was close to a rebel yell as the Union troops could get, as if sounded by 1,000 demons, they charged down the hill. And they drove the masses of the enemy back and pretty much wiped the hillside clean of Confederates. For the last time that day, the Confederates had completely lost their last chance at taking that hill. The Unions had their dander up, so they continued going, and they went beyond the hill, and they chased the Confederates through a marshy creek and up a grassy hill to a wall by the edge of the wheat field. And the Confederates there made a last stand from a wood and started firing into the Union line. This struggle lasted but a short time. A Union commander ordered that the Confederates lay down their arms, and the Confederates, for the most part, did, until one of their troops in the back said, "I would never surrender to a corporal's guard," in which case the Confederates repicked up their weapons and continued firing. After a few volleys into the wood, 50 Confederates surrendered. And that was pretty much the end of that evening on Round Top.
That's what was left, was like 50 guys?
Yeah, 50 Confederates.
Bought on Little Round Top must have been knee deep.
Yes. Oh, yes. Imagine trying to deal with all those bodies if you lived in the town and the areas around it.
Well, just the battle that you're talking about. You're trying to get up and down these hills. You're climbing over the bodies of your comrades.
And sometimes using those bodies as concealment.
Oh, gosh. Not to mention stealing their shoes and...
Oh, yeah. Or their guns, or their ammunition, or their rations, or whatever you need.
And they've been fighting on this hill day.
Right. By the time that the Pennsylvanians were done on Round Top, it had probably been a 5-hour battle that had been going on since the late afternoon. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening when all of the fighting died down.
And what were the numbers again? 104,000 on one side and 75 on the other?
Yeah. And the casualties for all 3 days were 50,000 for both sides. Confederates probably lost a little bit more than the Union because they were the ones attacking, and that's usually how you usually get more casualties when you're on the offensive.
Interesting.
Okay, so basically at this point you have the end of the second day. It's evening. Lee's attacks all day long have failed. They almost succeeded, but not quite. He has decided over the evening to make a center assault the next day, right in the middle of the Union lines, thinking that the Union has had to put in reinforcements on each of the flanks and the center will be weak. Okay, so the next day comes up and he gives General Longstreet, his second in command, orders to bring up his final corps, which is commanded by a General Pickett. It's the only Confederate corps that has not seen action yet. They're totally fresh and unscathed. And there's 15,000 troops, and they all line up in the center of the lines on the third day. This is July 3rd. And Longstreet is in total disagreement with Lee over this. They have to cross a mile of open plain, completely no protection at all, marching. And the Union have cannons, and he's like they're gonna destroy us. But Lee has his dander up. He's like, there they are. And Lee felt the whole second day that they almost did it. They almost got there. And he could not let his troops, after doing so much, retreat. He felt that they had to win. He felt that the time was now and it had to happen.
And that's why he was General Lee.
Right. And so Longstreet, he was so against this attack that when it finally came to order the attack to tell Pickett to charge, he couldn't tell him. He just gave him a look. He just nodded at him and said, yeah. He didn't actually say anything. And Pickett said, oh, cool. And he took off and they did the attack. Now, of course, now this is something interesting too. Lee ordered Jeb Stuart. Remember I told you about Jeb Stuart, the cavalry commander?
Yes.
He had charged he ordered him to run behind the Union lines and cause some grief. And he took his cavalry out there, and he was met by complete luck, by a Union cavalry commander by the name of Custer. The same Custer in the Battle of Little Bighorn.
Really?
Yes. Custer stopped Jeb Stuart in the Battle of Gettysburg from doing any kind of mischief on the third day during Pickett's charge.
Which is probably why Custer got his later... Go ahead.
He was the youngest Union general. He was like 27.
They all knew each other, too, right? We've discussed this before. All these generals knew each other and had been in battle with each other.
Yeah, they all served together in the Mexican War.
Oh, yes. Custer, he just happened to be the young one.
Yeah. So Lee, his army has been decimated. He started off with about 74,000. He's down to about 40,000. And so he's got to pull out of the north. He's got to go back. He's got to run back to Virginia.
He's got to get out of there.
He's been defeated. This is, his whole effort to force the Union to the negotiating table has failed.
Has not worked. Time to go home.
Right. And so he takes off on July 4th, Independence Day. And this is ironic because that same day on Independence Day, Vicksburg falls to Grant.
I didn't realize those were happening at the same time.
Yes, the exact same time. So basically, on the 4th of July, the Confederacy's chances to win the Civil War were destroyed. The city of Vicksburg did not celebrate the 4th of July for like 87 years after the Civil War. Yeah, they did not celebrate it.
Out of
it was
protest or mourning?
Out of both.
Really?
Yeah.
Vicksburg was a big deal to the Civil War. It took Grant like a year to take it, didn't it?
At least 6 months. Yeah, it was at least 6 months, and it was a lot of planning. Yeah, and stuff. But so at this point, Lee's running away. Vicksburg has been taken. General Meade, who has much more superior numbers, could have destroyed Lee's army before it even got across the Potomac. But Meade didn't. He didn't do that, which Abraham Lincoln freaked. He freaked on General Meade for not following up on this huge battle and so many casualties.
Really?
And that's when Grant got the promotion that made him the general in charge of everything. Because Meade did not pursue Lee and end the war.
And Lincoln was not just disappointed, but angry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hey, at this point, he's been through like 6 generals who, with superior numbers, have gotten their asses kicked. And they had a chance to crush Lee, and Meade got scared and didn't go after her. So yeah, it's a turning point because Grant gets in charge of the whole army, and his strategy, because his strategy in the West is basically he puts Sherman in charge to go do his march to the sea, and then he does his thing with Lee. He keeps Lee occupied while Sherman just ravages the South.
How much longer did this last?
The war didn't end until April of '65.
2 more years.
2 more years. 2 more. Yeah, if Meade could have ended it right then, but Lee managed to continue on for another 2 years.
Because it was 3 years before Gettysburg, and then didn't follow him home. And now it's 2 more.
Yes.
5 years.
And Lincoln had to go through an election in '64, right in the middle of the war. Imagine all this going on. He's the only person he's the only person ever who had to be a president to run an election during a civil war.
Or just, there's probably not many, well, I don't know, but Civil War for sure.
Right. So that's it. These are all interesting facts.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so basically that was the turning point of the war was Gettysburg. At this point, the Confederacy is never on the offense again. And the Union can pretty much do what they want with them.
Because they were marching forward. At the beginning of this story, Lee was on top. He was doing
Yeah.
well. They were marching forward, looking for shoes.
And they were, yeah, they were a mean, rugged army that they wanted to threaten Washington, and they just wanted the Union to sue for peace. They didn't want to conquer anything or do anything like that. They just wanted the Union to stop picking on them.
That's how they saw it for sure.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then they ended up with how many troops at Gettysburg?
About 40 out of 74.
Or how many passed away?
Oh, 50,000 casualties altogether.
And how many people were there? 150, 200? What was
Well,
200,000?
both armies together would have been about almost 200,000. So, one quarter of all the troops that showed up to that battle died, or were.
Is Gettysburg known as obviously one of the worst battles ever because the most people
Yes,
died?
it's the worst battle in American history, and it's also the worst battle of the Americas, North and South America, the Western Hemisphere.
Really?
Yes. We lost more troops in the Civil War than any of the other wars we ever fought.
That's just so sad. Is it just statistically speaking because like so many people died or there were so many people there? I mean, what other big battles was is it just that much bigger than any battle that's ever happened in America? Like how many people are down in Vicksburg? How many troops does Grant have when he's trying to take Vicksburg?
100,000. And the Confederates had probably about 50,000.
Just throwing bodies at this war.
Yeah, yeah. But if you, in numbers, I mean, we had 1 million troops in World War II, which dwarfs anything. But what we're talking about is comparatively. Like the population of the United States during the Civil War was much smaller than it
Oh
is
no.
now.
That's
And so the percentage of Americans that died is insane compared to, because there was millions and millions of people in World War II that
yes.
lived in America. And so, yeah, I mean, more people died in later wars, but percentage and by population, the Civil War was the most insane.
It's just a lot of young men.
About 1/5 of the entire population died.
That's a lot.
Right. And
Isn't
it's crazy because they were fighting each other. Same God, same language, same names. They come from the same places.
I guess that just shows you that that is the worst. That's what we want to avoid. Because then you know each other. You don't want to fight your own brother.
Right. Right. And actually some people did. Brother against brother.
For sure.
Families that were destroyed. Like one person would stay loyal to the Union and the rest of the family would disown them forever.
Forever. They write books and novels and movies about that
Yeah,
stuff. It's in
exactly.
all those things like the Hatfields and McCoys and whatnot has some sort of version of that.
Right, exactly.
We've discussed before the Civil War and World War One were both particularly gruesome wars, weren't they?
The Civil War was fought with rifled muskets, which could shoot farther than the tactics allowed. Because the tactics were to group everybody together in a tight formation and shoot all together at once because that's the most power. But it's also the most susceptible to enemy fire.
Yeah.
And then in World War One, you had stuff like gas and machine guns.
Oh gosh.
Okay, so I'm talking about the smoothbore musket made it, impossible to make a charge. Think about making a charge with machine guns shooting at you. So yeah, the generals were using tactics that didn't work anymore. That's why in World War II, everybody started using tactics that matched the technology. So you didn't have these stalemates with all this endless slaughter. You were actually able to win battles and make progress.
Didn't just
Yeah, because
sacrifice
World War
young men.
One was insane. It was just a stalemate with these guys in these trenches, and one side would send their guys across, and they'd get mowed down by machine guns, and the other guys would send their guys across, and they would get mowed down by machine guns.
And
So the
they
casualties actually in World War One were way more insane. Basically, in World War One, that entire generation of young people died.
all of them.
The entire generation, all died
Just died.
because of stupidity. And World War I actually accomplished nothing except pissing everybody off, so there'd be a World War II.
Yeah, it was just leading up to the second.
Right. It was, yeah.
It was ugly.
Basically, it made Adolf Hitler,
Mad.
pissed him off, and he was able to do what he did.
He never got over it. Didn't take him long to reorganize.
But so, anyways, that was pretty much it for the Battle of Little Round Top. I'm thinking of getting medieval next time.
That'd be cool. I dig medieval.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We'll get.
Let's go get all medieval. I'll get some medieval on your shit. I'll bring out some weapons.
Yeah. Some maces and some broadswords and battle axes.
I always want one of those. A mace. That would be cool.
A mace or a flail? Which one are you
What's
thinking
a flail?
of? A flail is a ball with a chain.
Yeah, I want something with spikes sticking out of it.
Exactly. A mace is like a stick with a ball with spikes at the end.
Yeah,
and a flail is a stick with a chain that has a ball at the end of that.
I'll take either one.
And so they're both pretty gruesome weapons. Yes, medieval.
Let's get medieval next time, James.
For sure.
Thanks. Good night.
It's been fun. Have a great evening.